don't want to brag, but, you know, they've said this about a lot of things. No other president could do some of this I'm doing. No other president.
On that, we believe you. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. It is an understatement to say that Donald Trump is no stranger to self-aggrandizement. But lately, his policy priorities have taken egomania to a pathological level that's invited questions about his mental fitness from his one-time allies. There's his insistence on his $400 million ballroom. He's got the whole cabinet singing off that song sheet. There's his plan for that 250-foot arch. You don't know much about arches. That's really tall as far as arches go. And this one has gilded lions. Gilded, I had to look it up, means gold and an angel on it. And if those plans are too subtle for your taste, he's going to put his face on our passports. Everywhere we go, we'll have to show our picture and his. He's going to put his signature on our currency and our money. Unsurprisingly, Donald Trump's me everywhere approach to being the president of the United States of America right now isn't helping him at all. It isn't getting rave reviews from any voters, not even his own, who are increasingly feeling the squeeze of Donald Trump's economic damage, largely brought about by the war in Iran. Just 28% of Americans support Donald Trump's plan to build himself a gilded ballroom. 21% of Americans support his plan to build a gold-adorned, angel-adorned arch, a big one. And 12% of all Americans support putting Donald Trump's signature on our money. But that feedback loop, that thermometer, that way to test how your policies and ideas and priorities sound with the American people, that thing that might deter any other normal president to not do those things for reasons that we'll debate here over the next hour and days and weeks, they don't seem to matter. They don't resonate with Donald Trump. An alarming new piece of reporting in The Atlantic offers some clues as to why that is. They warn us that Trump's major focus for his second term is leaving his mark on America, no matter the toll on the rest of us and whether or not any of us wants to be marked with Donald Trump's face or signature or structures. The Atlantic writes this, quote, "The tendency to self-aggrandize is as fundamental a feature of Trump as his sculpted hair and overlong red ties. But it has become even more important in setting his priorities and steering his actions as he hurdles through his final term in office. He no longer has to worry about the judgment of voters and can instead focus on what he's decided really matters, ascending to become one of history's so-called great men and leaving an enduring and in many cases physical imprint. The result, at least so far, has cost many lives and billions of dollars, damaged the world economy, strained already fragile alliances, and cratered the president's standing with the public. But those around him cast his new focus as a liberation. Quote, he is unburdened by political concerns and is able to do what is truly right rather than what is in his best political interests, the administration told us. Quote, hence the decision to strike Iran, end quote. For Trump, the costs have been outweighed by what he views as the opportunity before him, a chance to transform the world in a manner that few historical figures have ever even approached. A second Trump confidant summarized bluntly, quote, he's clearly in his I don't give an F mood. We wonder how that differs from all his other moods here. Trump fiddling, painting his face on everything he can reach while Rome burns is where we start the hour. Staff writer at The Atlantic and a contributor to The Atlantic Daily newsletter, Tom Nichols, is back. He's a professor emeritus of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. Also joining us, Protect Democracy Executive Director Ian Bassin is back with us for the hour. Ian, your take on this sort of collision of reporting, that these things that really do read like they're fake because they're so asinine and I guess more importantly unpopular, are where the president's focus is. He carries around his little picture of the gilded ballroom the way normal people carry around pictures of their kids.
Well, Nicole, I love coming on the show because I was going to go to Roman classical references, and you started there with Nero fiddling as Rome burned. But
it's like brilliant producers.
if we're going to talk, sort of Julio-Claudian dynasty, it's not Nero, really. It's Caligula. Caligula was the emperor who basically put his face and imprint on everything. He was considered to be erratic and self-aggrandizing and dangerous, and went around basically, really was the sort of personalization of the empire. And then eventually it was the emperor Commodus who chopped the heads off of existing statues and ordered his minions to replace those heads with sculptures of his own. And so, we are having no kings protests around the country, but we may need no emperors protests because Trump is behaving like one. And as you point out, the American people are responding as they should, which is with a complete distaste for this. The irony is that, it's talked about that one of the most effective political ads Trump ran in 2024 was the ad that said Kamala Harris was for they, them, and Trump was for you. But as with everything Trump, it always is a misguided projection because Trump has always been about me, Donald Trump. And we're seeing that now in his I don't give an F whether people know it or not phase.
Yeah, I mean, and the truth is he gives a lot of Fs. That's why he's out there suing news organizations. Someone that doesn't give an F does not sue the New York Times for $15 billion. They're not raiding the homes of Washington Post journalists. They're not ranting and raving the way he does. I mean, they don't carry around their little picture. I mean, there's nothing in his conduct, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but there's nothing in his conduct that carries the brand of someone burdened by what other people think. And I on your point about no kings, there is something in the DNA of this country that feels like a tipping point. And the most public display of it was Minneapolis, where people took to the streets and on their own descriptions of themselves and why they were there, they said, this is not America, killing 2 American citizens for exercising their First Amendment rights to protest. You mentioned the No Kings protests. 53% of Americans associate as part of the No Kings movement. It is bigger, almost twice the number of people who approve of Donald Trump's performance on, name your issue, the economy, immigration, foreign policy. What does it make that he's now sort of grabbed the king thing? He tweeted out a picture of himself with King Charles yesterday and said 2 kings. He's riding the most unpopular trait about him with his own political coalition. What does that portend, Ian?
Well, I mean, there's 2 plausible ways of understanding it, and both are probably true. One is that there's something deeply defective about his personality, which I think we've known to be true. The second is that he thinks that the laws of political gravity don't apply to him because he's not really planning on honoring the American voters' will when it comes to the midterm elections, just as he didn't honor the American voters' will when it came to 2020. In fact, he never has. And this is where I think the data that you point out about the breadth and size of the No Kings movement is so important, because Donald Trump has never allowed an American election to simply take place while honoring the will of the voters. He tries at every stage to deceive, as we've said, to deceive, disrupt, and deny, to deceive people about whether or not they can trust the system, to try to disrupt the system, to tilt the playing field in his advantage, as other strong men around the world who he admires have done, and then to deny the results. And ultimately, the American people and our system has been incredibly resilient against that. We've survived it each time he has tried. We will survive it again, but it will not just be on the backs of lawyers going into court and litigating and legislators fighting this and brave election officials standing up and doing the right thing. It also will depend on the American people coming out en masse to exercise their rights in a democracy and voting and not allowing themselves to be intimidated. And ultimately, if there is an attempt to deny the rightful and lawful outcome of the election, of the American people following the lead of the people of Minnesota and Minneapolis and saying, we will simply not abide this sort of authoritarian takeover of our country, and we will stand in the streets and make it impossible to proceed along those authoritarian lines. And that's the credit of what the No Kings movement has done to this point, has given us the foundation of being able to do that if we need to come the midterm elections.
I mean, Tom Nichols, I think as a retail political matter, it's also given us an umbrella. You don't have to be a Democrat or Republican to say, I don't want a king running this country. And in terms of brands, Trump seems to respond to brands that are up and brands that are down. No Kings is up, MAGA is down in, Trump speak. I want to, though, not look away from the dark possibility that Ian points out, because he's the second person in 2 days to take the conversation there. Michael Feinberg did so yesterday. When you see the autocratic practices, building a, kind of ballroom that would make Putin jealous, and seemingly not caring that is the modern parallel, putting your face and your name on everything. What is your sense, sort of take me from the laughable, it's certainly mockable, it telegraphs such flagrant insecurity and narcissism, but to the ominous in terms of where this is heading?
Yeah, and I'm glad you've raised that, because I worry that we are underreacting to the fact that the President of the United States is a deeply emotionally unstable person. There is something wrong with him. This is not just, a guy whose ego is getting the best of him. He is a deeply disordered person. And it just bears repeating. Nicole, you pointed out he carries around pictures of his Golden Ballroom. He also carries around the codes to 1,500 strategic nuclear weapons. He's the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. He's the president. And like every president, he is the most powerful man in the world. And frankly, the things he's doing and the things he wants to do are completely bonkers. And we have all been shouted down into saying so, because about 25% of the American public simply shrieks in anger if you point any of these things out. These are the same people that if you tried to put Barack Obama's name on an elementary school, they'd have an aneurysm. But they have, and I think part of the reason that they shout down their critics about this is because they know that this is lunacy. They know that he's surrounded by gutless sycophants who know how completely off the rails he is, but have nowhere to go, and aren't going to stop him because, think about it. If you're somebody like Pete Hegseth, once you're no longer Secretary of Defense, what are you? You're a washed up TV host. And so we've all kind of gotten used to sort of, rolling our eyes and saying, boy, that's really crazy stuff. It's worse than that, because it does suggest that there are no limits to what he will try. I mean, this is somebody who has demolished a chunk of the White House because he felt like it.